glittering chandeliers cast flickering shadows over the marble floors of Bissimo, Chicago's most exclusive Italian eatery, where only the elite partook in the finest. Among the hushed hum of affluent patrons and the delicate clash of fine china, Harper Mitchell felt the familiar burden of exhaustion settle on her shoulders as she carried a tray laden with wine glasses. Her hands trembled slightly as she approached Table 9, the restaurant's most coveted spot, currently occupied by the infamous Callahan family. At the head sat Patrick Callahan, whose legitimate business empire barely masked the criminal syndicate he had inherited from his father for over 30 years. Harper kept her gaze lowered as she set a deep red wine glass before the formidable man, cautious to avoid eye contact with those piercing steel blue eyes that seemed to scrutinize everyone they fell upon. A faint waft of cologne-rich, subtle, dangerous reached her nostrils, mirroring the man himself. She was nearly past him when his voice, smooth and aged like fine whiskey, halted her in her tracks. "You're new here," he stated, not asking but asserting, demanding acknowledgement, despite his casual tone as his sharp gaze assessed her with unsettling precision. 3 weeks, sir," Harper responded, fighting to keep her voice steady while clutching her tray like a shield. Every instinct urged her to retreat, to blend into the background, where waitresses like her belonged in the presence of men capable of destroying lives with a single command. Patrick's eyes narrowed slightly, a faint smile curling his lips, perhaps amused or calculating. "You seem familiar," he said, tilting his head in a way that made Harper's heart skip an acknowledgement she couldn't afford. The table's conversation fell into silence as his associates watched the exchange with covert interest, predators sensing potential entertainment. Harper's mind darted through escape routes, both physical and conversational, as she masked her unease with a veneer of polite confusion. "I doubt we've met, Mr. Callahan," she replied. The lie felt bitter on her tongue as memories surged crime scene photos strewn across her father's desk. Funeral arrangements, whispered promises at a graveside just 6 months prior, when Patrick's nephew accidentally knocked over a water glass. Harper seized her chance, swiftly mopping the spreading puddle before it reached the Mafia boss's pristine suit. Leaning forward, she made a split-second decision that would redefine everything, whispering words meant only for his ears. "I know who killed your brother," she breathed, so softly it was barely audible above the restaurant's ambient noise, then straightened with practiced professionalism. The shock flickering across Patrick's usually impassive face was her sole confirmation he had heard her. Harper resumed her duties, her heart pounding as she felt Patrick's gaze linger on her, calculating, reassessing. She had wagered her life on the most dangerous game she'd ever played, risking everything: her father's reputation, her safety, her very future, for information that had already cost her family dearly. When the evening drew to a close, Harper was unsurprised to find a black SUV waiting in the alley behind the restaurant, its sleek silhouette a familiar sign of trouble. Standing beside it was Roar, Patrick's intimidating head of security, arms crossed with a stoic expression. "Mr. Callahan would like a word," he announced, opening the door with a gesture that made it clear this was no request. Inside, the vehicle was lavish buttery leather seats and tinted privacy glass, inconsequential to Harper, who now faced Patrick Callahan himself, whose previously stunned expression had morphed into one of dangerous curiosity. "You have exactly 1 minute to explain yourself before I decide what to do with you," he said in a low, weighty tone. Harper took a steady breath, summing up 6 months of meticulous planning into this moment. She reached into her coat, placing her father's detective badge onto the seat between them. "Detective Frank Mitchell was my father. He was investigating your brother's murder when someone staged it as a suicide," she said, her voice firm. Patrick's face remained unreadable as he picked up the badge, turning it over in his hands that Harper knew had ordered countless deaths. "Why would the daughter of a police officer come to me instead of internal affairs?" he asked, his tone deceptively gentle as his eyes searched her for any deception. "Because the same people who framed my father are embedded in your organization and corrupt elements within the police," Harper replied, maintaining direct eye contact for the first time. "And I have evidence that your brother was working with my father to bring them down before they silenced both of them." Patrick's stillness was more chilling than any outburst. He studied her silently, the badge almost tangible between them. "You do realize that making such accusations could get you killed," he finally said, more as a warning than a threat. Harper produced a sealed envelope from her jacket, her father's buried insurance policy, discovered hidden behind a family portrait after the funeral. She handed it over. "These are photos of your brother meeting with my father, along with account numbers being siphoned from your businesses, money being diverted." The Mafia boss's expression hardened as he took the envelope and broke the seal, revealing the contents. The photographs showed his younger brother, David, in clandestine meetings with her father, both scrutinizing documents with serious expressions. "David was always the idealist," Patrick murmured, grief flickering across his features before he carefully stowed the photos away. "He wanted to clean up the family business, make it fully legitimate before my daughter grew old enough to understand what we do." Harper hadn't anticipated seeing this vulnerable side, this glimpse of the man behind the ruthless persona. "My father believed in justice more than the system," she explained, her voice thick with emotion as she recalled Frank's late-night confessions about corruption reaching the highest levels. Patrick examined the account statements, his businessman's mind connecting dots names and signatures, confirming long-standing suspicions. "Charles Wendell," he said quietly, naming his trusted financial advisor, whose signature appeared on several suspicious transfers, along with Captain Brooks from the 31st Precinct. The revelation hung heavily in the air, confirming betrayals from trusted associates in both their worlds. "They've been working together for years, bleeding your operation while using police resources to eliminate anyone who got too close," Harper recited, the conclusion of her father's investigation. Patrick's eyes darkened with icy fury as she instinctively pressed back against the seat. "And you've been serving drinks at my table for 3 weeks, gathering intel, planning this moment," he stated, a mix of respect and weariness in his gaze, an acknowledgement she'd anticipated. "I needed to be sure you weren't involved," Harper admitted, her honesty her only defense after laying her entire hand bare. "My father believed your brother was trying to protect you from what he'd uncovered." Patrick was silent for a long moment, weighing options with the calculating patience of a man used to making life-or-death decisions. "You've put yourself in serious danger coming to me," he finally said, his tone sober as he tucked the evidence into his jacket. There are people in my organization who'd kill to keep this quiet. Harper felt the weight of her fears and her resolve settling into her voice as she replied, "They've already taken everything from me. My father, our reputation, our home." The bitterness of these months colored my words, but I stand by what I've revealed. Patrick studied her anew, seeing beyond her waitress uniform to the woman who had orchestrated this perilous gambit. "What do you want from me, Miss Mitchell?" he asked, the formal tone signaling a shift in their dynamic. "Justice," she answered simply, encompassing all she had risked her life, her family's honor, her very future. "And I believe you want the same for your brother, whether you operate on the right side or the wrong side of the law. Justice takes many forms in my world." His gaze sharpened as he made a decisive choice, one that would irrevocably bind their fates. "You'll come with me to a secure location while I verify everything you've presented," Patrick said. Harper recognized this as protective custody, both shelter and prison, and nodded, having already packed a small bag hidden in her locker. "I have evidence at my apartment that could identify everyone involved," she said. Roar and Elise, Patrick's security chief, and the woman driver she hadn't yet noticed, would accompany her to retrieve her belongings, he explained, gesturing to them. The safe house surprised her, far from the crude warehouse or fortified compound she'd expected. It was an elegant brownstone in Lincoln Park, tastefully furnished, equipped with state-of-the-art security. "You'll stay on the third floor," Patrick instructed as Roar carried her duffel inside. "Consider yourself my guest, though you won't be leaving until this is all resolved." Harper studied the gilded surroundings, the discreet cameras, keypad locks, and felt the bittersweet mix of gratitude and weariness. "How long?" she asked, the practical concern of someone already calculating the price of her choice. His smile was cold, but firm. "That depends on how complicated your father's investigation turns out." He gestured toward a sleek laptop on the coffee table. For 3 days, Harper scarcely saw Patrick as she meticulously organized her father's scattered investigation notes into a coherent narrative tracing money flows to suspicious deaths classified as either accidents or suicides. Her sleep was shallow and fragmented, haunted by memories of her father's obsessive obsession in those final weeks. On the 4th morning, she descended into the kitchen to find Patrick seated at the table, his suit jacket slung over a chair while he examined the evidence she'd compiled. His intense focus reminded her uncomfortably of her father's own manner. "Your work is thorough," he acknowledged without looking up. "I was studying forensic accounting before." Harper hesitated, the sting of the scholarship she'd lost after her father's disgrace still fresh and raw. "The patterns are clear once you know what to look for," Patrick continued. "They've stolen nearly $40 million from your operations over the past 8 years. Her eyes met his, now filled with a newfound respect that sent a strange shiver down her spine. Wendell had called an emergency meeting for the following evening, citing discrepancies in the quarterly reports, his mind already scripting the trap. As Patrick rose and closed the distance between them with purposeful steps, Harper felt a subtle shift in the air. "You understand," he warned softly, "that once we take action against them, there's no turning back." His proximity made her acutely aware of the dangerous man behind the polished businessman facade. Harper nodded, her throat constricting as she grasped the weight of their fragile alliance. The moment she found her father dead, with a bullet wound and a fabricated suicide note beside him, she knew she'd lost the luxury of retreat. 2 weeks fell into a strange rhythm of strategy sessions and uneasy cohabitation. Patrick balanced the demands of legitimate business meetings with clandestine preparations, while Harper studied him when he wasn't looking, trying to reconcile the ruthless crime boss with the man who placed fresh flowers beneath his brother's photograph every morning. The breakthrough came unexpectedly one day, as Harper reviewed security footage Patrick had obtained from his brother's building. "Stop," she gasped, pointing at a familiar silhouette in the corner of the frame. It was Detective Walsh. He had testified he was across town that night, yet the footage showed him there just 20 minutes before the time of the victim's death. Patrick's shoulder pressed against hers as they huddled over the laptop, his cologne mixing with the aroma of coffee. The timestamp confirmed Walsh's presence at the scene, cementing their shared suspicion and sending a jolt of electricity between them. That evening, Roar brought takeout from a small Italian place, not listed on any delivery app, setting out steaming containers of pasta that smelled like heaven after days of tension. "My mother's restaurant," Patrick explained, uncorking a bottle of wine that probably cost more than Harper earned in a month. As they ate, Patrick shared stories of growing up in his family's business, of shielding his younger brother from harsher realities, while envying the freedom to chase legitimate dreams. He revealed that he was studying law. "Did you know that?" he asked, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. Harper found herself sharing pieces of her own childhood, how she'd followed her father to crime scenes, her aptitude for numbers making her his unofficial assistant by 16. "I saw patterns where others saw chaos," she admitted, surprised at how easily the words flowed after months of guarded silence. Their conversation stretched past midnight, the wine loosening inhibitions and mutual grief lowering defenses built over years. "You would have made an excellent detective," Patrick observed, his eyes lingering on her face with an intensity that transcended their investigation. The next morning shattered the calm when Elise burst into their Brooklyn brownstone, blood seeping through her jacket sleeve from a bullet graze. "We've got Walsh," she grimly reported to Patrick. "He's dead, and they're asking questions." Instantly, Patrick's demeanor shifted. The casual warmth of last night's intimacy was replaced by cold efficiency. He issued rapid orders into his phone. "The safe house has been compromised," he told Harper, placing a sleek handgun into her palm. "Stay close and remember what we practiced." The SUV routed them through a maze of side streets and alleyways before pulling into a private garage beneath a high-rise overlooking Lake Michigan. "My personal residence," Patrick explained as they took an elevator up to the penthouse. Only 4 people knew this location. The space was surprisingly lived-in bookshelves lined with well-worn classics, family photos, a piano with open sheet music. This glimpse into Patrick's private world humanized him in ways Harper hadn't expected. He moved through the apartment, checking security measures, his jacket open to reveal a shoulder holster that seemed as much part of him as his expensive watch. "We need to accelerate our timeline," he said suddenly, loosening his tie with a quick tug that drew Harper's gaze to his neck. She found herself standing too close as they reviewed their contingency plans, the adrenaline and proximity generating an undeniable energy between them. "If something happens to me," she started, but Patrick cut her off with a look that held too many unspoken messages. "Nothing will happen to you," he promised softly, reaching out to brush a strand of hair from her face, his touch lingering just long enough to steal her breath. That brief moment shattered when Patrick's secure phone rang, displaying Wendell's name in sharp digital letters. Patrick answered with perfect composure, as if he hadn't been moments away from crossing a line with the daughter of a dead detective. "The meeting's been moved up to tonight," he told Harper after ending the call. "Wendell claims he's identified the source of the financial discrepancies and will present his findings to the entire Leadership Council." Harper's mind raced, piecing together possibilities as she paced the penthouse living room. "It's a setup," she said grimly. "Either he's planning to frame others, or he intends to eliminate anyone who questions his story." Patrick nodded grimly, already sending instructions to his most trusted associates. 6 family heads in the same room would be disastrous. The power vacuum could trigger a war that destroys everything we've built, he said, offering her a dark look into the fragile stability of their world. As Patrick coordinated with security, Harper discovered a hidden safe behind a modernist painting, revealing the extent of Wendell's betrayal. She spread out documents on the dining table, transfer orders dating back 10 years. The truth was more sinister than either had feared. Wendell had systematically undermined the Callahan organization while bolstering their rival, the Petrova family, creating vulnerabilities for a potential territorial war. "He's been playing both sides," Patrick said grimly, each revelation darkening his expression. The final piece clicked when Harper cross-referenced dates of large cash transfers with police raids. Every major operation was preceded by large transfers to offshore accounts belonging to shell companies. Patterns too regular to dismiss as coincidence. Patrick studied the evidence with icy fury, his long-standing trust shattered. Wendell had been a friend of his father for over 30 years. The personal betrayal stoked his rage further. A secure video call from Roar confirmed their worst fears. Facial recognition identified Captain Brooks entering the Petrova compound earlier that day. They were consolidating alliances, and the deadly puzzle was complete. Harper watched as Patrick transformed his professional mask, slipping to reveal the strategist who had maintained his family's dominance through countless battles. "We need leverage," he decided, eyes locking onto a document detailing a property transaction in Wendell's name. The next 3 hours became a whirlwind of coordinated effort as Patrick's trusted men gathered intel on a lakeside warehouse suspected of housing incriminating documents. "It's our only chance to find concrete evidence linking them to your father's murder," Patrick told Harper as they prepared for the raid. Despite his objections, Harper insisted on coming. "I can identify my father's case files on site," she argued, adjusting her bulletproof vest with Elise's help. Under cover of darkness, they arrived at the seemingly deserted warehouse. But Harper's gut instinct warned her something was wrong. "This is strange," she whispered to Patrick as she noted the blinking, irregular pattern on the security panel. Before she finished, gunfire erupted in the night, an ambush that forced them to scatter behind shipping containers. Bullets pinged around her, metal clanging and ricocheting as chaos erupted, and she was suddenly separated from the others. Heart pounding, Harper crouched, bullets whizzing past her as she fought to stay concealed amid the shifting shadows. A shadow shifted to her right, and Harper spun around, weapon ready, to face her father's former partner, Detective Mason. His face, usually lined with sympathy, now bore a cold stare, his firearm pointed directly at her chest. Her heart sank as the reality hit. She had been right all along. "You shouldn't have delved into this, Harper," he said, his voice steady, the barrel unwavering. It hit her like a punch. He had been complicit from the start. You were involved all along, she realized, pain stabbing deeper than she expected, from a man who once carried her on his shoulders at department picnics. Did he pull the trigger on my father, or did he just help cover it up? Mason's expression hardened, resignation replacing remorse. Frank couldn't let it go. He kept pushing even after we warned him, he explained practically, as if that excused murder. The Petrovas offered a better arrangement than the Callahans ever could, he added coldly. Harper kept her voice even as she kept him talking, knowing each second was critical, each one buying her team's chance to outmaneuver their enemies. And David Callahan? Was that your work too? She asked, her finger unshaking on the trigger. Despite the turmoil roiling inside her, she held steady. Mason's eyes flickered, and he nodded slowly. David was collateral damage. He stumbled onto one of our meetings with Brooks, he admitted. That brief distraction gave Harper the opening she needed. She dove behind a stack of crates as gunfire erupted from another direction. The warehouse suddenly a battlefield shifting alliances, desperate gambits, chaos. Moving with practiced agility, she crawled through the narrow gaps between storage units, recalling the skills her father had drilled into her for clearing dangerous buildings. Near the back of the warehouse, she found Patrick pinned down by two armed men. Blood dripped from a grazing wound on his temple, spattering across half his face. Without hesitation, Harper took aim and fired twice, her shots hitting their marks with the precision her father had hammered into her at the shooting range. Patrick's eyes met hers, awestruck, as she hurried to his side, tearing a strip from her shirt to staunch the bleeding. "You're full of surprises, Ms. Mitchell," he rasped, voice strained but steady, as they moved together toward the office at the rear. The reinforced door yielded to Patrick's security override, revealing walls lined with filing cabinets and a high-tech computer setup. "Cover the door," he instructed, starting to download files onto a secure drive, potentially more damning than anything physical. Harper stood guard, replaying Mason's confession in her mind, while scanning the warehouse for movement outside. "They killed your brother because he uncovered their partnership with the Petrovas," she said, piecing everything together as adrenaline sharpened her focus. Patrick worked methodically, his fingers flying across keyboards despite the chaos outside. "David was always the moral compass of the family," he said suddenly, grief flickering in his eyes before it was replaced by resolve. A massive explosion rocked the building fire, spreading quickly through wooden crates and papers, clearly a desperate attempt to destroy evidence. Harper quickly realized they were burning the warehouse contents, which explained how damaging the files within must be. Patrick seized her arm as the download finished, guiding her toward an emergency exit just as smoke began billowing into the office. "We have what we need," he assured her, tucking the drive into his jacket as they navigated the increasingly perilous route out. Emerging into the night, they saw the warehouse engulfed in flames, the orange glow highlighting the ongoing chaos. Combatants still fighting amid the destruction. Harper spotted Mason limping toward a vehicle, clutching a drive similar to the one Patrick had secured. Without hesitation, she broke away from Patrick, her fury and sense of justice propelling her forward despite the danger. "Stop," she commanded, gun trained on Mason's back as he turned, resignation flickering into calculated calm. "Frank's daughter," Mason said with a twisted smile, holding up the drive. "I wondered how long it would take for you to figure it out. Your father was just as stubborn right until the end." Harper tightened her finger on the trigger, the moment she'd envisioned so many times finally within reach. "You don't get to speak about him," she thought fiercely. The flames cast flickering shadows over their standoff, sirens blaring in the distance, complicating the already volatile scene. The fire had triggered alarms, drawing both firefighters and police to the scene. "Shoot me or let me go, Harper." "Either way, you're out of time," Mason taunted, taking a cautious step back. Patrick appeared beside her, his presence steady despite the blood still seeping from his temple. "With the fire and casualties, the police will be here soon. Brooks and his team will be overwhelmed," he said quietly, his tone reminding Harper of the stakes. In a heartbeat, she fired a precise shot shattering Mason's hard drive, rather than his skull. His face twisted in rage as the evidence was destroyed. Patrick moved swiftly, disarming Mason with a practice strike and sealing him with zip ties pulled from his jacket. "He's our insurance policy," Patrick explained as they dragged the struggling man toward Roar, who waited by the vehicle. The escape from the warehouse was a blur, tactical movements executed flawlessly, prepared for the worst. Harper found herself riding in the back seat of a sedan, sandwiched between Patrick and the unconscious Mason. From the front, Elise reported that federal agents would be all over the scene by dawn. "Brooks won't be able to contain this mess," she added, navigating past police blockades through side streets. Patrick, cool and composed, pressed a burner phone to his ear, speaking in coded phrases Harper understood as plans in motion. "We've got 12 hours before Wendell realizes Mason and the evidence are gone," he said, with grim resolve, locking eyes with Harper. They headed to a secluded modernist glass house on a bluff overlooking the lake, registered to a shell company, far removed from the Callahan name. Patrick explained it was his father's panic room, a shelter equipped for surveillance and communication, hidden from prying eyes. The evidence they retrieved exceeded Harper's expectations. Not just financial records, but years of email exchanges between Wendell, Brooks, and Prova lieutenants, systematic eliminations of anyone questioning suspicious fund transfers. Her father's name appeared on the list of targets. Working side by side, soaked in soot and blood, Patrick and Harper pieced together the conspiracy that had claimed his brother and her father. They uncovered plans to frame her for embezzlement at tonight's meeting, falsified evidence already prepared in his name. Mason regained consciousness, strapped to a chair in a shadowy corner, his bravado long gone as he saw the mountain of incriminating evidence piling against him and his co-conspirators. "The Petrovas will kill you all," he warned, voice trembling with fear now replacing confidence. Harper approached Mason cautiously, her anger barely contained as she held up a photograph of David Callahan's murder scene. "We're getting a full confession on video," she declared coldly, not asking, but stating it as fact. Patrick set up recording equipment, and the slow process of breaking Mason's resistance began. Harper expertly applying her understanding of police psychology, Patrick interjecting with pointed questions about illicit transactions. Dawn broke as they finalized the recordings, producing a detailed confession that named Brooks, Wendell, and 3 Prova captains, implicating them in both murders. News reports emerged of a warehouse fire with multiple fatalities, more evidence of what had happened, and already being shaped by Brooks's influence in the department. Harper watched the coverage, her detachment masking her awareness of reporters favorable to the police. Patrick later entered the bunker, freshly showered, his wound dressed professionally, carrying coffee one taste of relief after a sleepless night. "The family council is still scheduled for noon," he said, voice cool, despite the danger lurking. Harper accepted the steaming mug, their fingers brushing briefly, a silent acknowledgement in the chaos. "Wendell will be desperate once he realizes Mason and the warehouse evidence are gone," she deduced, her mind calm and strategic. The next hours blurred as they coordinated encrypted communications and detailed plans with Patrick's trusted lieutenants. Wendell likely expects an ambush when he sees the empty evidence and missing Mason, so they prepared accordingly. Harper organized the understated proof into irrefutable terms, proof that would satisfy both criminal factions and law enforcement, with particular focus on separating Brooks from his remaining police protection, the most dangerous obstacle still in their path. The breakthrough came unexpectedly, as Mason, perhaps trying to lessen his eventual punishment, revealed that Brooks kept a hidden office for meetings with Prova representatives. Located in the basement of the Meridian building, accessible only through the parking garage, Mason's disclosure was marked by a hint of desperation that underscored his cooperation. Patrick studied Harper intently, his face unreadable, as the last pieces of their plan clicked into place. "You understand?" he said softly. "Once we carry out this operation, there's no turning back to your old life." The words hung heavily between them, tangible in the air. Harper's mind drifted to her empty apartment once shared with her father, to her promising career that was abruptly derailed by his disgrace, to the lonely months spent plotting revenge, which had ultimately left her scrubbing tables at Bissimo. "My normal life ended the day they killed him," she responded plainly, her voice steadier than it had been in months, replacing doubt with firm certainty. The operation demanded impeccable timing and flawless execution. While Patrick confronted Wendell at the council meeting with partial evidence, Harper would go with Roar to trap Brooks, using Mason as bait. "If anything feels off, you abort immediately," Patrick instructed, a rare flicker of concern breaking through his composed exterior. Harper sensed the protective instinct behind his words, so contradictory to the ruthless crime boss the world believed him to be. "I've come too far to back out now," she told him, straightening her borrowed blazer that concealed both a recording device and a slender handgun. As they parted, the moment was filled with unspoken possibilities, the tension solidifying into something neither had anticipated when their dangerous alliance was formed. Patrick's hand cupped her cheek gently, his eyes conveying emotions he couldn't voice. The underground parking of the Meridian building was deserted when Harper and Roar arrived with Mason restrained, the office tower above oblivious to the scene unfolding beneath. Brooks always took the service elevator after his usual Thursday lunch, Mason explained as they waited near the private entrance. As expected, Captain Brooks appeared precisely in time, his police instincts kicking in when Roar stepped out of the shadows. "Whatever Callahan's paying you, I can outbid it," Brooks offered, reaching cautiously toward the gun tucked beneath his jacket. The flickering fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across his face, revealing the deep lines of corruption etched into his once respected features. Harper's memory flashed back to police banquets where this same man had spoken about integrity, all while secretly orchestrating her father's murder. A passing security guard paused, eyes widening at the tableau before him, until Roar flashed a badge one of Patrick's expertly forged identities. The officer quickly retreated, granting the team the privacy needed for their next move. Harper stepped forward into the harsh light, badge displayed alongside her weapon. "This isn't about money," she stated firmly, a surge of satisfaction flickering across her face as the captain's expression shifted to one of fear. Brooks launched a desperate counterattack, his experience making him a fierce opponent despite the trap, but Harper's relentless precision and Roar's brute force quickly took him down. "Your confession will fit perfectly with Mason's," Harper said coolly as Roar secured zip ties around the captain's wrists. Meanwhile, across town, Patrick faced his own confrontation in a wood-paneled conference room where the Callahan family's affairs had been managed for 3 generations. Wendell's meticulously prepared presentation crumbled as Patrick systematically laid out financial records that dismantled the narrative of Patrick's embezzlement. The family council members watched in stunned silence as their trusted financial advisor's deception was exposed, culminating in proof of his collusion with their bitter rivals. "The Petrovas didn't infiltrate our organization," Patrick declared confidently. "They were invited in by the very man we trusted with our legacy." Wendell's attempt to escape was swiftly thwarted by security guards at all exits, his carefully crafted schemes collapsing under the weight of irrefutable evidence. Patrick's voice rang with conviction. "David uncovered your betrayal, not as a question, but as a deliberate act of vengeance delayed too long." His phone vibrated with a message from Harper, confirming the capture and extraction of Brooks' proof that their synchronized operation had succeeded against all odds. With that final element in place, Patrick addressed the council, a newfound purpose shining through his words. "For too long, we've operated in shadows that allow corruption like Wendell's to thrive," he announced, outlining a vision rooted in legitimacy and accountability, an echo of his murdered brother's ideals. The council members exchanged uneasy glances, torn between tradition and survival, as they considered this radical shift. 3 hours later, Patrick found Harper waiting in his private study at the family estate. She looked exhausted but victorious, the thrilling taste of justice finally within reach. "Brooks has broken completely," she reported, holding up a recorder containing a second comprehensive confession that verified every element of their case. "The evidence has been collected and anonymously sent to federal authorities' strategic leaks to trusted journalists ensure the investigation won't be buried by corrupt officials. By tomorrow, the story about her father would begin to change, Patrick promised softly. Harper's eyes welled with tears, a bittersweet wave of vindication threatening to overwhelm her. Without her father alive to see it, she felt her crusade nearing completion. He would have hated that it took a Callahan to deliver justice, she admitted, with a faint, weary smile. Patrick moved closer, the barriers between them dissolving in the aftermath of shared peril and purpose. "And his daughter?" he asked softly, a question heavy with implications about her feelings for him and the uncertain future they faced. Harper hesitated, contemplating how their relationship had evolved from waitress and client to reluctant allies, and now to something far more complicated, something that blurred the lines between their worlds. "I think she's still trying to figure that out," she replied honestly, acknowledging the unexpected bond forming between them. 2 weeks later, Harper stood beside Patrick during a press conference where the FBI announced indictments against Brooks, Wendell, and several Provo lieutenants for the murders of Detective Frank Mitchell and David Callahan. The narrative carefully omitted Patrick's role, focusing instead on the exposure of corruption through anonymous sources. Outside the federal building, journalists clamored for statements, while photographers captured the historic moment when justice was finally served after months of calculated risks. Harper noticed her father's former chief, a man who had refused to pursue questions about the suspicious circumstances surrounding her father's death, watching from the sidelines with a complex mixture of shame and grudging respect. The evening news portrayed Harper as the steadfast daughter who had never wavered in her belief in her father's innocence, transforming her into a symbol of perseverance resonating across social media. Patrick watched her emergence into the public eye with quiet satisfaction, having taken care to keep her connection to him out of sight through careful information control. Harper's reinstated scholarship came with an unexpected offer to join a specialized task force dedicated to financial crimes. Delivered by an FBI agent, an old classmate of her father's, she declined politely, explaining her commitment to private consulting. Patrick observed her with a subtle smile, understanding her reasons. Frank Mitchell was posthumously cleared of any misconduct, his reputation restored as the dedicated detective who had uncovered a vast conspiracy at great personal cost. Harper accepted his revived police badge from the police commissioner, joining officers who had once ostracized her family. Behind the scenes, Patrick began implementing his brother's vision for the Callahan organization, divesting from criminal ventures while bolstering legitimate enterprises. David always believed the family legacy could be something our children wouldn't have to hide, he said quietly as they reviewed progress reports. It'll take years, and there will be resistance from those committed to the old ways, he added, but approach the challenge with the same strategic brilliance that had enabled them to dismantle a seemingly untouchable conspiracy. Harper found herself increasingly involved in the legitimate business side, her financial expertise vital as their relationship grew more cautious, both aware of their complicated pasts and the scrutiny they would face from both sides of the law. "We make an unlikely pair," Patrick remarked one evening during a quiet dinner at the same restaurant where Harper had once whispered her dangerous revelation. Harper smiled as she watched him wipe the table in echo of their first encounter, but now carrying the weight of everything they had survived together. Sometimes, the most unexpected pairings give rise to something truly extraordinary, she said softly, extending her hand to him amid the bustling restaurant, the very place where their unlikely story had first begun. Thank you all for joining us on this journey. If you enjoyed it, please share in the comments where you're watching from. And remember to like, subscribe, and share this video. Your support is vital in helping me keep producing content like this.